Unveiling Sinister Secrets. 12 spine-chilling confessions from haunted prison guards exposed. Claire's heart raced as she wiped down the diner counter, her eyes darting to the window. A dark silhouette loomed behind the flickering neon sign Harrington Prison. That prison had been a source of nightmares, a crumbling behemoth shedding despair like a cracked shell. Tonight it felt different, alive and hungry. She shook her head, dismissing the eerie whispers from the guards' ghost stories that slipped through the diner like smoke. Menaced by shadows, Claire felt the weight of Harris' specter, haunting her and her 2 children. "Well, let me tell you, it gets haunting in there," a grizzled former guard said, stirring his coffee as he leaned across the counter. "Lights flicker, you hear voices. Once, I swear, I saw shadows moving between the walls." His eyes were wide, brimming with panic. Claire's skin prickled. What if those whispers haunted her children too? Just then, she caught sight of the guard. He lingered longer than usual, his presence thick as fog. Panic gripped her, a primal fear that twisted her stomach. There was something about him, his shadow stretching like an accusation as he turned to face her. She could barely breathe. If her instinct said he was a danger, she had to trust it. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Claire's thoughts raced. Jenny and Jake had been acting strange lately, sleepwalking, talking about friends in the dark. She recalled how Jake cried out, claiming the man with the crooked smile was watching him. Chills ran down her spine. The diner felt suffocating, as though the walls whispered secrets in the dead of night. That fateful evening, shadows danced at the periphery of her vision, blurring the line between reality and dread. Claire's mind spun as the air thickened with an unsettling presence. Just outside, moonlight clung to the prison like a shroud. She couldn't take it anymore. Panic pushed her out the door, drawn toward the prison grounds as if something invisible tugged at her soul. The wind wailed, wrapping her in raw terror as she stepped toward the looming walls. They towered over her, dark and oppressive, harboring secrets that wanted to break free. A low rumble echoed, sending shockwaves through her body. She felt as if the very stones taunted her. Claire's heart pounded. Something wasn't right, something dangerously close, and there, amidst the thorn-tattered grass, she stumbled onto chipping stone bearing odd symbols she almost recognized. Fear struck her, a solid weight pressing down. An urge to flee flooded her senses. But she couldn't turn back now. Clutching her breath, she reached out, touching the cold surface, sentience racing through her fingers. What had she unleashed? What connection did it have with Jenny and Jake and the horrors that slinked through the hours of the night? Lost in the darkness, shadows emerged around her, swirling in wicked laughter. Claire's pulse quickened as the well of dread spilled into a chilling realization. It was never just about the prison's ghosts, it was about her. The true terror lurked close, a malevolence tangled in the threads of her daily life, waiting for the chance to strike. As she turned to flee, her heart sank. The voices were back, familiar yet distorted. It was her children's cries spilling from the shadows, whispering promises of things unspoken, what was lurking in the depths of Harrington. The howling wind clawed at Claire's skin, the chill shifting through her bones. She stumbled back, her breath quickening into sharp gasps. The shadows around her writhed, taking form, twisting ominously, as the hushed voices grew louder. They echoed close, so close that she dropped to her knees in the damp grass, hands trembling against the cold earth. "Mommy! Help!" The cry was Jenny's, warped and broken, a spectral rendition that cracked her heart open. Claire's throat constricted. She couldn't see her daughter, but she could feel Jenny's fear radiating through the shadows. "Yes, here." Claire scrambled to her feet, terror exploding in her chest, forcing her legs to move. The prison loomed like a giant, hungry beast, its presence suffocating. She turned again, willing her feet to carry her home, to her children. But the air thickened, making every movement sluggish and heavy. Dark figures flickered in the peripheral. Darting behind the dilapidated prison walls, something was watching. A piercing gaze zeroed in on her, and she froze. The guard from the diner was there, emerging out of the blackness, his eyes hollow. A cruel smile stretched unnaturally across his face. "Lost, are we?" he whispered, the words slithering into her mind like poison. The ground beneath her seemed to vibrate with a low hum of laughter. "You shouldn't have come here, Claire. The past can be a rough terrain, but oh, how sweet the echoes can be." Panic surged, her instincts screaming for her to run, but her feet glued to the earth. "What do you want?" she gasped, an ember of defiance igniting her fear. "Not what? Who?" he said, his voice dripping with malice. The world around Claire warped, reality dissolving into a haze of despair. "You've already brought them back. You've opened the door." The name he uttered sent her spiraling. Her mind slipped back to the prisoness' evil stories, the tragedy, the victims, the spirits born of pain. Were her children trapped now amidst those wretched souls? Were they calling to her for help as she stood paralyzed before the looming specter of dread? "Your children are hungry now. You shouldn't have drawn their attention," the guard continued. His hollow laugh echoed, chilling her blood. Every instinct told her to turn and run, but deep down, a dark seed of curiosity rooted itself in her heart. What did he mean? Visions flooded her mind's sightless eyes, flickering in the dark, whispers of lost souls brushing against her consciousness. Time seemed to stretch as she glanced back at the prison. The door of horror cracked just enough to let the past seep through. "Find them before it's too late," the Titan of Shadows warned, his form dissipating into the void, laughter trailing like smoke. Now the only sound was Claire's frantic heartbeat and the fading cries of her children, urgently pleading from within the prison walls. She faced the crushing decision. To step into the abyss and chase the whispers her children's cries deeper into Harrington, or to flee into the shrinking night as her mind wrestled with the decision. Claire felt the earth rumble beneath her. A crack emerged in the ground, jagged and wide, yawning like a mouth preparing to swallow her whole. The laughter intensified, angry and maddened, snapping her from the thought. But what waited inside? Before she could grasp an answer, shadows surged forward, reaching for her dark tendrils that promised either salvation or doom. She took a breath, steeling herself, and took one step forward into darkness. The prison's mouth opened wider, and her world shrank. The last thing she heard was her son's frightened wail, echoing against the walls of the damned. And then, silence. What had she let in? She couldn't breathe. The darkness pressed against her, smothering every thought. Every scream lodged in her throat. Claire's heart raced, a dull drum echoing in the vast nothingness. Instinctively, she reached out, fingers brushing against the flimsy walls of her surroundings, cold and unyielding. "Jenny, Ethan," she called, her voice shaking as it ricocheted through the oppressive silence. Each name felt like a sacrifice, pulled from her chest with desperation. Silence lingered, heavy and mocking. Then, above the hush, came a whisper, a slither of sound both familiar and twisted. "Mommy, where are you?" It was Jenny, but distorted, soaked in fear and sorrow. Claire clutched her head, her mind spiraling. "I'm here. I'm coming." She stumbled forward, blindly reaching through the eerie gloom, her hands trembling. Each step felt like a betrayal of her own body. Was the ground shifting beneath her? Or was it her imagination? A flicker of movement caught her eye. Shadows danced just out of reach, darting behind pillars of crumbling stone. She pivoted, heart hammering, and took another step, her feet faltering on unseen debris. Then came laughter, high-pitched and frenzied, slicing through the darkness like glass. Took her a second to realize it wasn't just in her mind. The laughter echoed, a cacophony of madness that bristled along her skin. "Mommy, save us. Mommy!" It was Ethan's voice, twisted into a laugh that shrieked through the veins of the prison. Fear slammed into her, its icy grip clawing at her insides. She pressed forward, a threadbare hope flickering within. "I'm coming," she yelled again, desperation spilling over. The laughter intensified, pushing her deeper, further from the safety she had just left. And then, she saw them, a faint light glowing from behind a heavy steel door, where the voices twisted together, merging into a sounding storm. Shadows twisted and curled, shapes rising from the ground like smoke. They coiled around Clara's ankles, inviting and repelling in equal measure, whispering promises of reunion mingled with threats. "Find us, Mommy," the voices beckoned. "Don't leave us." With a surge of resolve, Claire lunged toward the door, reaching for the handle, her fingers trembling as dread washed over her. It felt cold, unnaturally cold, beneath her touch. She turned it slowly, the rusty metal grating against itself, producing a sound that echoed cruelly in the darkness. In that moment the laughter stopped. Silence pressed back, as if the shadows were holding their breath. Gritting her teeth, she pulled the door open, a heavy creak reverberating through the air. Inside was a narrow corridor lined with cells, each one filled with the same dull glow. Clara's stomach twisted as her gaze drifted down the hall. The air was thick with a stench, decay, dust, and something far more sinister. A figure flickered at the far end. It was small and hunched, eyes shimmering like glass under the feeble light. Claire squinted, heart thudding. "Jenny?" she whispered. The figure flinched but didn't move closer. Instead, shadows encroached around it, faces emerging in the dimness. Familiar faces twisted into grotesque smiles, void of warmth. They leered, feeding off her fear. "Did you come to play?" one voice crooned, echoing in her mind. "No," Claire shouted, stepping back. "I came for my kids." But the shadows only laughed. The air crackled with energy, a pulse of impending horror vibrating through the ground. Clara's heart raced as every instinct screamed at her to flee. Then she felt it, a tug somewhere deep inside her, a pull toward the sweeping darkness. The cold whispers around her slithered in her ears, enticing. "Join us." Claire, forever she fought it, grappling with the voices that promised loss and despair. But as she stood there, glancing between the familiar figure of Jenny and the dark tendrils reaching out, she knew she had one choice left to make, which path would lead her closer to her children, and which would send her spiraling into that insatiable dark. Suddenly, the laughter renewed, a chilling chorus reverberating down the corridor. Had her children truly brought her here, or was it all a ruse to draw her in? Determined, Claire took a step forward, heart racing. "I won't leave you." As she crossed the threshold, the darkness surged toward her, and the door slammed shut behind her with a deafening boom. What awaited her inside? The weight of the door's thud sent ripples of panic through Claire. Fear clawed at her throat like a living thing, scrabbling for a way out. She stood frozen, breaths shallow and rapid, as the darkness writhed around her, whispering threats and half-formed promises. "Mommy!" The cry came again, sharper this time, tinged with genuine terror. It grounded her, pushing Claire through the damp corridor, her heart a drum against the quiet shadows. "Jenny! Ethan!" she shouted, her voice desperate, piercing the veil of the unnerving whispering. The glowing cells flanked her like jagged teeth, a circus of trapped souls. She could feel their eyes boring into her, wretched and hungry. A chill ran down her spine. They weren't just shadows. They were memories, lost souls, and her heart twisted with each step, the familiarity of their faces both comforting and grotesque. As she approached the hunched figure at the end of the hall, it began to unfurl. The darkness receded, revealing more of Jenny, but there was something wrong. The gleam in her eyes was vacant, hollow. "Help us, Mommy!" Jenny's voice trembled. Claire's heart lurched. "I'm here. Sweetheart. I'm gonna get you out." The air thickened with dread as she reached out, fingers outstretched, desperate to bridge the gap between them. Knew the laughter returned, cold and ringing, bouncing off the walls and ricocheting inside her mind. Shadows darted past her, teasing, mocking, swellings that distorted reality. Was it her imagination trailing her fears, Or did she feel icy fingers brushing against her arms? Join us, the shadows hissed, the words a sickly sweet invitation. Before she could react, the walls seemed to pulse and shift. The corridor darkened further. Fear wrapped around Claire's chest, constricting, suffocating. She stumbled back, but the laughter turned into a chorus of howls, tugging her deeper into the suffocating gloom. "Mommy!" The cry was pleading, genuine, buried beneath layers of grime and despair. "Hold on, Jenny," Claire shouted, tears pricking her eyes as she lunged forward, compelled by instinct. But as she reached her daughter, the figure dissolved into gleaming shadows, morphing into something else vile and grotesque. "Did you think it would be that easy?" The words slithered, dripping with disdain. "No," Claire shot back, a surge of anger mingling with fear. But every attempt to regain her ground felt futile. The coldness began to sink its claws into her mind, filling it with dread and sorrow, visions of darkness all around. "Would you sacrifice yourself for them?" A voice whispered, closer now, almost intimate. "Become one of us?" Claire shook her head, the truth of it clawing at her. Outside, she could hear the faintest echo of the whirlwind rustling through trees, distant sirens, life. But inside, here, it was a realm of despair, whispers wrapping around her like chains. The flickering light from the cells began to falter, throwing the space into deeper shadows. Statuesque figures loomed, casting long, menacing shapes as shadows began to stretch and twist. Cold sweat dripped from her brow as the laughter crescendoed, merging into a terrifying choir. Claire shut her eyes tight, struggling against the malevolence. She had to break through. Then, light flickered into existence behind her, a golden halo. Claire turned towards it, hope igniting. "I'm coming," she screamed, charging back toward the light, just as chains of vile energy shot out and grabbed at her. "Forever," they hissed, pulling her back, with the last ounce of her strength. She wrenched herself, hands bracing against the cold, clammy walls, and pushed forward into the light. Was it hope she felt, or another trick of the shadow? Just as her fingers grazed the warm glow, everything darkened once more. The laughter shrieked and swirled into a frantic cacophony. "Mommy, why are you leaving?" The familiar voice echoed, hollow yet piercing, a desperate plea circling back in twisted desperation. As the darkness swallowed her again, Claire braced herself for the unknown. The question hung thick in the air. Would she ever find her children, or would she become just another whisper in the abyss? On the edge of her consciousness, something stirred, dark and potent, an unsettling revelation. What if the prison's true horror lay not in the shadows, but in the choices she had yet to confront? What would she have to sacrifice to save them? The shadows curled tighter around Claire, pulling her deeper into their desolation. The walls felt like they were pressing in, suffocating her. The laughter echoed endlessly, a twisted symphony of torment. Claire took a shuddering breath as the familiar cries of her children faded into the darkness, replaced by a gnawing silence that sent shivers down her spine. "Jenny, Ethan," her voice barely echoed back, lost to the oppressive weight of unseen forces that surrounded her. She felt the ground beneath her shift erratically, as if it were alive, writhing with every falter of her resolve. With trembling hands, she reached out for the flickering light that had called to her before, but the brightness was gone now, swallowed by the abyss. Was it ever real? She wondered, fear slicing through her like a blade. In that moment of despair, a figure stepped into view, cloaked in darkness. It moved slowly, deliberately, each step echoing like a death knell. Claire's breath caught in her throat. It was a face she knew well, yet it twisted into a mockery of the love she had once known. Mommy, it was not her Jenny or Ethan, but a shadow of their likeness, eyes glowing with a malicious hunger. "No, no, no," Claire choked out, backing away. The shadows lashed at her ankles, whispering promises of forever and belonging words that tasted of betrayal. "Get away from me. Do not turn your back on love," Claire the apparition crooned, its voice both alluring and sinister. "They need you just as you need them. Embrace the darkness, you will find them." The chain of her hope began to fray. What if this was the truth? What if they had been lost in the shadows, waiting for her to save them, yet here she was, abandoning them? Help us, please. The cries were drowned out in the din, but were clear enough to pierce her heart. Each plea twisted like a knife, driving her deeper into a haze of fear and confusion. Just when Claire thought she could bear it no longer, the corridor shifted again, revealing doors lining the walls, some cracked open with flickering lights spilling out, others closed tight, emanating dreadful whispers. Claire raced to the nearest door, a flicker of hope sparking within her chest. She pushed it open, heart racing. But instead of safety, she was met with swirling shadows and faces, their mouths wide in silent screams. The tormentors seized her, their icy hands gripping her shoulders. "Join us!" they shrieked in unison, the cacophony of despair rising to a fevered pitch, nearly deafening her. Claire squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out their shrieks. She bolted to another door, wrenching it open with desperate strength. This time, light poured out in waves, illuminating the grotesque distortions of the trapped souls. Claire's heart seized again at the sight of two small figures, their silhouettes moving within. "Mommy! Jenny! Ethan!" she cried, her heart racing wildly with renewed determination. She reached inside, fingers brushing the edges of familiar shapes, but the moment felt fleeting, as though they were static, phantoms dancing just out of reach. But darkness surged again, grasping at her heels, drawing her back into the nightmare. "Do not go to them," the shadows hissed, merging into a black mass that pressed against her. "They are your weakness. You will lose yourself." With a surge of intensity, Claire pushed against the shadows, heart racing. "I want to choose between them and myself," she screamed, her voice trembling with rage and defiance. And just like that, she felt a crack beneath her, an opening into the unknown, a tear threatening to pull her into its depths. It was all or nothing now. She hurled herself towards the light, bracing for the impact. But as she leaped, the laughter darkened into a roar, swallowing her whole. What awaited her on the other side? Would she face her children or fall victim to the shadows forever? As the darkness clamped down, a chilling thought crossed Claire's mind. What if the choices she had to confront were not just about fear, but decisions that could alter their very souls? Would she be strong enough to endure what was to come? The darkness swallowed Claire, a vacuum pulling her deeper into a void. The roar faded into a heartbeat, steady but overwhelming. Time felt suspended, stretching in the silence, and in her mind, she screamed, "Where are you?" Suddenly, she plunged into light, a blinding white that flickered like a dying bulb. She gasped, eyes adjusting, heart hammering as she stumbled forward. But she was not in a brighter version of the corridor. She stood in a vast, empty room, its walls pulsating with a faint glow, as if the very structure breathed. "Welcome, Claire," a voice echoed, both familiar and foreign, wrapping around her like a cold embrace. It was sweet but hollow, beckoning her deeper into despair. "Who are you?" she whispered, scanning the room for any sign of her children. "Your memories," the voice floated through the air, chilling her to the bone. She turned, and the walls shimmered, revealing scenes from her past, a home filled with laughter, birthday parties, warm hugs. But each memory twisted, reshaping into a nightmare. A lost child, a heartbreaking scream, shadows lurking just out of sight. "No!" She pressed her palms against her ears, trying to block out the haunting images, the suffocating guilt. They clawed at her sanity, dredging up the worst moments of her life. "I want to look." But one particularly vivid vision pierced through her defenses. A dark room, a broken lullaby, and the fading laughter of two children. "Join us, Mommy," the echo called again, soft yet filled with an eerie promise. Why did it hurt so much to hear? "Jenny? Ethan?" Claire's heart raced, hope pushing her forward. Her children were somewhere. She could feel it. She turned, searching for a way out of this nightmare realm. The walls began to shift again, morphing into a long hallway, each step toward the end feeling like walking toward the brink of a cliff. Come back to us, the whisper darkened, the shadows stretching forth, creeping closer. She could feel their cold tendrils brushing against her skin, tugging at her with claws formed from her own fear. No, she screamed, grappling with the snaking darkness that threatened to pull her back into despair. I'm not done fighting. But her fight was met with an overwhelming wave of doubt. What if this was her memory too? What if she was meant to feel trapped here, forced to relive her failures? The towering shadows behind her swelled with approval, feeding on her hesitation, spreading their darkness like an infection. Choose, Claire, they hissed, voices blending into an unholy chorus, each word stabbing her heart. Choose to forget never, she screamed defiantly, her voice rising above the wailing shadows. She sprinted down the corridor, fueled by a desperate need once more, to find her children, to grasp the hope that burned, flickering yet strong. But as she approached a door at the end, the air thickened, resistance wrapping around her legs like chains. Claire struggled to move, panic seeping into her veins. The shadowy figures danced behind her, a predatory laughter filling her ears. Turn back. Embrace us, they shouted in an echo of her children's voices, taunting her, mocking her every step toward the door. No, I will find them, she howled, wrenching open the door with every ounce of strength she had left. The moment it swung wide, an icy wind rushed out, stinging her skin and filling her lungs with dread. Inside, the light flicked and faded, revealing a scene that froze her in place. Her children stood there pale and spectral, mouths moving in silent pleas, their eyes wide and tear-streaked, reaching toward her from beyond a barrier that glimmered like shattered glass. Mommy, help us! The distortion of their voices splintered her heart. Terror rippled through Claire. She stepped inside, extending her hands toward them, but the door slammed shut behind her, plunging her into a world of fragmented joy and gut-wrenching anguish. Would she be the light that saved them, or would she surrender to the darkness forever? In that moment of realization, the shadows surged forth, whispering sweet promises of release, urging her to succumb. Would Claire dare to challenge the darkness or find herself trapped eternally in the agony of her choices? The air crackled with a chilling silence, oppressive and thick. Claire felt the weight of despair pressing down on her chest, each breath a struggle against the void that threatened to pull her under. Her children's eerily silent pleas echoed through the room, a melody of heartbreak that twisted her heart in knots. They looked so fragile, even from a distance, almost as if they could dissolve into the shadowy energy surrounding them. Mommy, help us! The echoes of their cries prickled her skin, igniting a desperate fire within her. She stepped closer to the glimmering barrier, desperate to touch them, to assure them that she was there. But with each step, the shadows writhed and whispered, weaving illusions to pull her back. Join us, Claire, they hissed, tantalizingly seductive. The familiarity of their voices turned her gut, reminding her of countless bedtime stories, shared laughter, and cherished moments. This pain can end. Just let go. No, she shouted, feeling the intensity of the shadows pressing against her like a vice. The specters danced closer, swirling around her, their shapes blending into the nightmare of her memories, pinching her soul with regret. I won't abandon them. She stumbled backward, feeling a surge of defiance. Furiously, she swiped at the eerie figures, but they slipped through her fingers like smoke. Panic ignited as she felt the disintegration of resolve. The room shifted again, the luminous walls twisting into a swirling chaos, reflecting every wrong choice she'd made, every dream shattered. A cacophony of voices rose, each one a dagger plunging deeper into her heart. Why didn't you save us, Mommy? The voice rose above the rest, the underlying accusation ringing clear and haunting. Claire squeezed her eyes shut, tears streaming down her face. I tried so hard, she gasped, the desperation clawing at her throat. When she opened her eyes, the scenes settled into one specific memory, a sun-drenched day at the park where she had lost sight of Ethan for just a moment. That moment had spiraled into a lifetime of torment. The shadows twisted, echoing her guilt, stretching her pain to the breaking point. Come join us, "Mommy, it's so quiet here," the whispers called her name, each syllable dragging her closer to the edge of surrender. "Not without you," she screamed, determination pouring through her veins with renewed vigor. The glassy barrier flickered, and she pressed her palms against it, ignoring the painful jolts that coursed up her arms. Each pulse of energy triggered a memory, another visit to the park, another promise she'd made. Desperation drove her to think beyond the memories, beyond what had gone wrong. "Ethan, Jenny," she cried out, her voice now clear and strong. "I'm coming. Just hold on." The barrier shifted, refracting the light and allowing glimpses of her children. They reached out in unison, their faces shimmering with both hope and despair. And then, a crack split the air, a sharp tear that rang like a gunshot, the boundaries of this twisted reality threatening to collapse. "You can't escape." The shadows roared, their forms elongating and reaching out like 1,000 clawed hands. They surged forward, a howling wave of darkness intent on dragging her back into the depths. "Mommy!" The cry echoed, and at that moment, Claire realized the shadows were not just manifestations of her fears. They were the culmination of all her regrets, her failures. "I won't give in," she bellowed, summoning the strength of a mother's love, piercing through the false narratives that had shackled her spirit. It spilled out of her, bright and fierce, cutting through the darkness with a blinding light. But the shadows responded, swirling around her like an electric storm. Would her love be enough to breach the barrier? As the darkness enveloped her, wrapping around her throat, Claire could feel the very fabric of reality straining. The walls pulsed ominously. Would she triumph, or would she succumb to the nightmares she had created? In the eye of the storm, the darkness swirled faster, their laughter mingling with the cries of her children. Just as she thought she was losing her grip, everything began to shatter. Was this the end, or the beginning of something even more horrifying? Claire's heart raced as she wondered what lay beyond the veil of darkness she'd fought so hard to escape. The world splintered around Claire, crumbling like dry leaves underfoot. The chaos swirled into a tempest as the shadows shrieked and howled, tearing through her thoughts like wild beasts. Every breath she took was tainted with despair, each inhalation shuddering against the impending darkness. She felt as if she were in the throes of a nightmare, fighting to wake up but trapped within its grasp. "Mommy," the whisper was softer, almost pleading now, weaving through the storm like a silken thread. The voices faltered, and for just a heartbeat, her children's faces shone through the shadows, their eyes bright with anguish yet fiercely alive. "Ethan, Jenny," her voice echoed, desperation warping every syllable as she cried out their names. The luminous barrier flickered, pulsating with energy. Beneath her palms, she felt warmth, not the cold emptiness she had come to dread, but the sweet heat of hope. It surged within her, igniting a fire she thought long extinguished. "Yes, I'm here. I'm coming." Claire pressed harder, her fingers tingling as they connected with the barrier. The shadows screeched in response, recoiling momentarily like frightened creatures retreating into the dark. But their retreat was short-lived, and they coiled back with renewed fury. "Foolish mother," they cried, their voices melding into a dissonant chorus. "You cannot defeat us." The ground shook beneath her feet. Shadows morphed into grotesque forms, contorting into wispy limbs and twisted faces, grasping at her as if to snatch away her resolve. Claire's heart raced, pounding against her chest like a caged animal desperate for freedom. Suddenly, flashes of memory invaded her mind, sharp and piercing. Ethan's laughter as he ran through the park, Jenny's sweet voice calling her name, the smell of freshly baked cookies wafting through their home, happiness that now felt like a sinister taunt. Each memory stung like salt on an open wound. Could she really save them? The barrier shimmered again, flickering with the essence of her love. "I won't let you take them," Claire cried out, a raw scream igniting the air around her. She could feel the surge of warmth enveloping her, pushing back against the icy grip of the shadows. But the darkness only shrieked louder, morphing into an overwhelming surge of despair. They thrived on her fear, each insecurity twisted into a weapon aimed straight at her heart. "You will fail," they whispered with sadistic glee, shadows morphing around her feet, like quicksand ready to swallow her whole with renewed ferocity. Claire pulled from the deepest well of her strength, building the essence of her love into a reckless flame. "You don't own me," she screamed, the force of her words shaking the walls around her. The light pushed against the darkness, illuminating the cavernous void with courage. In an explosion of brilliance, the barrier shattered, cascading light across the room like a brilliant sun breaking free from behind storm clouds. The shadows wailed in horror, their forms disintegrating under the intensity of her defiance. But Claire couldn't celebrate. She could sense the ground beneath her trembling, unstable, ready to plunge her into an unknown abyss. Suddenly, she was engulfed in a blinding light, falling, tumbling through a tunnel of white. Voices surrounded her, her kids' voices, echoing through the chaos. "Mommy, we're here. Help us." As the white enveloped her, Claire felt a freezing grip on her wrist and squeezed her eyes shut, ready to brace for impact. But instead of hitting the ground, she hovered, suspended in an eerie limbo. "Come to us, Mommy," the voices chimed, now clear yet shrouded in a sinister undertone. She opened her eyes slowly, heart pounding with mounting dread. What would she find on the other side? As the light dimmed, she realized it wasn't just the absence of color, it was the return of shadows. A chilling presence loomed ahead, billowing clouds of darkness eager to reclaim their prize. Was this the moment she shattered the cycle of despair, or the beginning of her descent into a nightmare she couldn't wake from? Claire hesitated, her breath caught in her throat as the unmistakable shape of a figure emerged from the gloom, beckoning her closer. Who are you?" she stammered, terror tightening around her lungs as the shadow flickered into a familiar form, indistinct but chillingly close. The figure shifted, cloaked in darkness, its outline wavering like smoke. Claire squinted, trying to make sense of the familiar shape. "Ethan? Jenny?" But the name hung in the air, heavy with uncertainty. The figure stepped closer, its face still shrouded. "You're not them," Claire said, panic rising from her gut, a mix of hope and dread. Her heart hammered against her ribs, drowning out the whispers that flooded the void around her. "Mother," the shadow crooned in a syrupy voice, "do you not recognize me? I am your deepest wish and your darkest fear." The words slithered through the air, curling and coiling, wrapping around her mind. "No." Claire shook her head violently. "This isn't possible. You're not real." But deep down, she recognized the truth. The specter of her self-doubt was taking form, and it was devastatingly familiar. It wasn't just the shadows shifting. It was her own reflection, the doubts she'd buried surging to the surface, waiting to tear her apart. "You want to save them," the figure hissed, inching closer. "But what if you're the one who leads them to their fate? What if—" "No. Stop." The words exploded from her throat, a visceral cry that echoed into oblivion. Yet each negation felt weaker than the last, her resolve cracking under the weight of its accusations. The darkness thickened, the air vibrating with the malevolent laughter of unseen forces who relished her turmoil. Claire shut her eyes, attempting to picture her children, their laughter, and the warmth of their hugs. But with each image, the shadow contorted them into guttural cries and twisted smiles. "Join us," the figure taunted, breath hot against her skin. "After all, you failed before. You'll fail again. They're gone. You know it." Her knees buckled, and Claire staggered back. Memories clawed at her. Ethan's frail body in the hospital bed, Jenny's little hands slipping from her grasp as they disappeared into the maelstrom of shadows. Tears streamed down her face as she gasped for a breath that seemed far away. "You are alone," the shadow pressed on, its voice rising into a crescendo of wicked glee. "Your love is weak, and it will not save them. Let go." "No, I'm not giving up," Claire screamed, her words laced with desperation. She stumbled forward through the tightening mist, determined to reach this hollow echo of hope. The figure flickered, pulsing like a dying flame, and Claire reached out, the warmth of her love surging through her. But just as her fingers brushed the shadow, it erupted into 1,000 pieces. Chilling laughter echoed around her, mocking her, pulling her into deeper despair. "Mommy!" The voices rang again, but they were fading. Claire felt reality slipping like sand through her fingers. The shadow had stolen some of that warmth, and in its place filled her chest with icy dread. "Help us!" Then silence. Clara's scream hung in the void, swallowed whole by the encroaching silence. She felt weightless, drifting in the darkness, leaning into her panic, forgetting. But the voices returned as faint whispers, a haunting melody threading through the emptiness. Mommy desperation clawed at her. "I'm coming. I'm suddenly." Wisps of shadow surged toward her, again forming shapes. They closed in, a suffocating embrace that threatened to crush her spirit. Claire braced herself, feeling the panic rise like bile in her throat. "I will save you," she whispered to the darkness. But who was she fighting against? The shadows? Or herself? Just as she felt herself begin to succumb, a light flickered, a small glimmer that burst through the suffocating dark. In that moment, she understood. To find her children, she had to confront the true source of the darkness within her. As the flicker grew stronger, Claire hissed through gritted teeth, ready to face it. "Show yourself." The shadows parted, revealing a swirling vortex, something impossibly ancient, yet achingly familiar. "Leave now or be consumed," it boomed, the mere sound of it rattling her bones. Sick terror gripped her as realization dawned. Not just any shadow, this was her own fear made manifest, echoing back. Her doubts, her failures. "Do I face my own darkness?" She pondered, breathless as she approached the yawning void. And just then, the silence shattered again. A piercing scream erupted from deep within the darkness, a sound that could only belong to the thing that sought to claim her, or the children she was desperate to save. "Mommy!" Their cries spun around her, each echo laced with urgency and terror. Claire's heart thudded painfully in her chest. Who was calling? What was waiting beyond the shadows as reality teetered on the edge? As the vortex loomed, Claire took a step into the darkness, steeling herself for what awaited her. But was she ready for the truth that was sure to come? The darkness pressed against Claire, its weight suffocating. With each step toward the swirling vortex, she felt the terrifying tension in her chest expand. What waited within those shadows was a reflection of her deepest fears, her greatest failures. And she was terrified. "Mommy!" The cries of her children echoed through the void, slicing through the dread and reigniting the flicker of hope inside her. She could grasp their desperation, feel their presence threading through the darkness. That urge to save them surged in her bones, igniting the ancient fire of a mother's love. "No!" she shouted into the gloom, her voice cracking under the strain. "I won't succumb to you." The air shivered, as if her boldness shook the very essence of the shadows. She stepped closer to the abyss, her mind racing with memories that fought to hold her captive. The laughter of her children filled her ears, a bright song interwoven with tangled threads of regret and guilt. With every inch she moved toward the vortex, the shadows howled in protest, draping themselves tighter around her ankles. "Join us, Claire," they whispered, tantalizingly close, mocking her every step. "You will never find them. You are alone." But she wasn't alone. Claire could feel it, a nagging warmth at the core of her being. Her children pulsed through her mind, momentarily illuminating the depths of the darkness surrounding her. She swelled with a fierce resolve. "I won't give up," she rasped fiercely. "Not on you." Summoning the memory of sunny afternoons in the park, bedtime stories, and shared giggles, Claire gathered strength. "Ethan, Jenny, I will find you." The shadows recoiled in a fit of rage, twisting angrily. It only propelled her forward. "Let us go," she screamed, pushing every emotion, fury, love, hope into a radiant beam of light. The shadows writhed, losing shape, their laughter turning to screams. Claire surged forward, plunging deeper into the vortex, ready to find her children and shatter the chains binding them. "Mommy!" Their cries drew her closer, a beautiful tragedy pulling her from despair. Bursting into the light, she felt the warmth mingle with her soul, and the murmur of danger faded behind her. Suddenly, she stood in the center of what appeared to be a vast, bright room pulsing with energy. And before her, the shadows coalesced, but this time into a shape she would recognize anywhere. It was her children, pale, ethereal, their outstretched hands illuminated by warmth. They looked at her, wide-eyed with longing and fear. "Mommy, help us," they cried, their voices echoing sweetly through the space. But Claire could feel the oppressive weight of foreboding threatening to spill from the corners of the room. "I'm coming," she called, rushing toward them, her heart aching with the sight. But as she neared, a veil separated them, a glassy barrier shimmering with an eerie glow. "Mommy," Jenny's voice pleaded, her little hands reaching desperately toward her. But the barrier reflected Claire's own fears. Her regrets both children were right there, yet still just out of reach. "I won't let you take them." She slammed her palms against the barrier, feeling its cold surface, the energy dancing against her skin, igniting her resolve. "Let go, Claire." The whispers groaned, suffocating her laughter and love. "Join us. You can be whole again." "No, this isn't who I am," Claire screamed, determination surging through her veins. "My love is greater." The shadows lunged at her, twisting hungrily, trying to claw their way back into her heart. Claire's breath quickened. She could feel the fabric of her power unraveling, but she wouldn't let fear root her here. She would break that cursed cycle. "I won't be afraid of you," she thundered, her voice rising above the chaos, drowning out the anguish of lost time and broken moments. "You don't own me." With that, she hurled herself forward toward the barrier, feeling a radiant strength bursting forth from within her. "I choose my children. I choose love." The barrier rippled. Light splintered into a million fragments as it shattered. Glass and shadows burst into the air, and in that moment of chaos, Claire lunged for her children, their hands reaching desperately for hers. Just as their fingers intertwined, a pulse of blinding light enveloped them. The sensation was both terrifying and liberating. Claire felt the darkness clawing at the edges, desperately trying to reconstitute itself, but the force of her love surged, intensifying with each heartbeat. And amid the surge, she heard her children's laughter, a sweet, golden melody that beckoned them towards safety. When the light dimmed, Claire found herself standing on the grass of their backyard, warmth filtering through her skin as the sun set in deep oranges and purples. She gasped, glancing down to find her children standing right there, whole and real, smiles glowing. "Mommy, you found us," Jenny shouted, her infectious laugh causing Claire's heart to swell with overwhelming relief. "Ethan." Claire knelt to embrace her children, warmth flooding her senses as they wrapped their small arms around her. All the fear and darkness dissolved into thin air, leaving behind only the vibrant colors of life. Claire's heart swelled as they stood together, illuminated in the fading light, tangled in love and laughter. The prison, the shadows, the terrifying darkness, they were behind her now. Maybe the echoes of regret would always linger, but she had conquered the shadows and chosen her children. She would choose them again, every day, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in colors of hope, she knew they were finally free. "Never again," Claire whispered, gazing into her children's radiant faces. "I will never let fear define us again." The urgency of the moment had passed, but the warmth of victory washed over them, sealing them together in love and light. And as the last traces of daylight faded away, they walked hand in hand into the night, ready to embrace the world, together. Now, before you head out into your own world, there is something urgent you need to do. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel, so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will grip your heart. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep this community alive. Flood the comments section with your reactions, thoughts, and theories about this thrilling ending. Let us hear what's on your mind. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who absolutely need to see this conclusion. Your support means everything. Let's build this amazing community together.